Hey, listeners, it's Paul Andriola here. Why not join our community at Small Cap Discoveries, where we offer our members direct access to some of the best microcap investment opportunities available? Our members are getting access to premium microcap financings, research reports, and direct access to management. Sign up today at www.smallcapdiscoveries.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Small Cap Discoveries conference call. Today is July 10th, 2025, and today on our call with the CEO, Brian McKinney from ICEsoft Technologies. ICEsoft trades on the Canadian Securities Exchange, or the CSE, under the symbol ISFT. The company is currently trading at 8 cents with about 112 million shares outstanding, or about a $9 million market cap. I'd now like to hand it over to Paul Andriola.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. Brian, great to have you here. We've obviously spoken a number of times in the past. So we thought, time is ripe to bring you on and have our membership get to know the business a little bit better. ISOF Technologies, I know what you guys are all about, but why don't I turn it over to you and tell everybody else what the business is all about?
Sure. Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to present here. So, as Paul and Trevor mentioned, my name is Brian McKinney. I'm President and CEO of the company, and why don't we get going? So, quickly, the boring stuff, but it is obligatory. So, these are forward-looking statements and descriptions. We are traded, as mentioned, on the CSE under ISFT. I will say we throw out a couple of different numbers here through this presentation. Some of these numbers are going to be audited. Others, for example, are Q1 numbers that you might see flash up here. Those would be unaudited in terms of how we go, just so that we can calibrate things for everybody. So about ICEsoft, we've been around for a number of years. It was my second company, and kind of a passion project here. We listed on the CSE in 2018. We basically did an RTO, like so many of us small companies do, of an existing shell company that was out there. As mentioned, we have about 112 million common shares outstanding, trading at 8 cents, bringing us in at a little under $9 million. A little bit more insight into that share structure. 78% is kind of held by 4 or 5 insiders on that, so roughly 87 million shares. The consequence is that trading is typically very light, and it can be illiquid in that sense. And we also don't spend a large amount of dollars on investor relations, so hopefully we'll let our performance and the product speak for itself. We're sitting at about $2 million total annual recurring revenue. Our flagship product, Voyant Alert, is growing at about 40 to 50% year over year. We are cash flow positive, and we have positive net operating income. We have 2 lines of business, if you will. One is a legacy product. It kind of started several years ago. It's called IceFaces. It's an enterprise software product. So if you think toolkits and libraries, kind of for web-based applications, so things that you would interact with through a web browser interface. It was an open source product that we offered, a conventional kind of enterprise model to monetize. I would characterize this as a very mature and declining market. We're sitting at about $830,000 in annual recurring revenue, and it is declining about 5 to 8% year over year. That said, it is highly profitable. We're sitting at about 90% gross margin there. And so for us, it's just a convenient source of cash for when we need it. The other product we have is called Voyant Alert, and it's our flagship product. It's really a mass notification service, and it's used both for sending out emergency alerts and day-to-day communications across the community or across enterprises. And we'll get into a little bit about what makes it special, but we do tend to focus more on the urban and rural deployments. We have a coverage of about 800 communities across Canada and the US at the moment. And of that 2 million, we're sitting at a little bit 1.2 million ARR, and it's growing at about 40% to 50% year over year. Churn on that product is very, very low, which is nice to see. So, digging deeper into Voyant Alert, addressable markets, we kind of have two. We focus primarily on municipal governments. So these would be small to medium-sized municipalities and regional governments. So everything from villages across Canada. We do a lot of First Nations communities to larger regional districts. And so, if you're kind of familiar with everything, we range from places like, Maple Ridge and Kamloops down to, the village of Valemount up in northeastern BC on that one. About 80% of North Americans live in communities of 250,000 and less. And that kind of gives us about 3,000 target communities in Canada and about 20,000 in the US. And there are a bunch of potential upsell opportunities here. So part of our strategy is let's get a decent footprint, and then we can explore some of these upsell opportunities, whether it's lone worker or, fix the pothole service kind of thing that's out there. As we look across market, Canada and the US, our average contract value in the US is somewhat higher. So our ACV is sitting at about 4,000 in Canada and 6,000 in the US. In Canada, we do reasonably well. We're holding about a 15% market share across our addressable market. And, the competition I would characterize as low to medium, but it is high in the US. And again, the primary difference is that we do focus not on the Vancouvers of the world or the, Torontos or Montreals. We tend to do a lot better and differentiate a lot more clearly on the smaller communities and the more rural environments. When we are in a competitive bid situation or, an RFP, we generally win about 85% of those, slightly less than the US. And our retention rate is above 96%. So that's all great and wonderful news. We in terms of how we get our leads, conventionally speaking, a couple years ago we did a lot of outbound calling and dialing, um, and a lot of direct marketing as you would expect, and we started to see that fall off. Where we get most of the leads today is from referrals. And so we do all of our sales strategy is built around how do we get more and more of these referrals. So 80% of our leads come in through our website, people filling out a form, we get a call. They say, hey, so and so from, this locale, one of your existing clients spoke highly of you and recommended you, and we're interested. Can we follow up and get a demo? On the enterprise side, again, the majority of the leads that we have, because we do sell to enterprise clients, they are as well coming in unsolicited in an inbound sense. And this is, interestingly enough, driven by exposure to the service from their municipal levels. So if we were to sell to a client, that client at the municipal level is broadcasting out to the community emergency alerts or informational alerts. Um, you know, the members of industry in and around that region pick up, they receive those alerts, and then they take it upon themselves to contact us directly or reach out to our website and go that route. So we do tend to target things that we call community adjacent, and this minimizes our product churn. And it also gives us a differentiator in that we can leverage the existing community enrollment numbers. So maybe we have, 15,000 people in a city or a town registered for Voyant Alert. And let's say there's a liquid natural gas utility or facility in and around that area that wants to leverage it. We can immediately deliver to them, an installed base of users that they can reach out to. And these are communities that, oftentimes will have alerting requirements that maybe proceed outside their fence line. So, maybe they have to notify their staff about certain events, but also in the case of something more extraordinary, they may have an obligation to kind of alert beyond that fence line. Um, we typically target, in this case, service utility companies. So think power, water, we do a lot of those. Hospitals, housing authorities, chemical and industrial manufacturers are all part and parcel of it. So, what kind of makes us different here a little bit more? So, I think you've all received, alert ready, kind of the Canadian national alerting systems, and you probably had some exposure to other ones. Where we try to differentiate is all of our alerts are personalized and enriched. So if we were to look at the image here on the left, the more traditional one, it's typically very tech-centric. They typically are very generic. If you were to receive one from the Alert Ready system, which is a kind of a broadcast intrusive, you don't sign up for it, it just forces everything onto the phones. They basically are very, very broad scoping in terms of the information provided. It's not specific. And so with our solution, basically, you're getting a lot more imagery. You're getting, here's where I am, here's where the gas leak is. You can see where it is on the map. We're providing you with turn-by-turn instructions, maybe to the shelter, or this is your evacuation route. We give you things like distance and direction. So, in the event where, say, we're evacuating a school and you're a parent, you're not being told, hey, the school's being evacuated. You're also being told, this is the pickup location and this is how you get there to recover your children, for example, in those cases. Um, our solution works very well with the federal and state-based solutions that are out there and the provincial ones. So as I mentioned, we kind of augment that. If a federal or provincial one goes out, we can intercept it, and then we allow the local alert providers the ability to augment and supplement that information with local information. So maybe it's a wildfire evacuation alert. We detect it, we load it up on the system, it may have been issued by a province, for example, and then locally they can the local administration can supplement and augment that information there. As mentioned, we tend to optimize the product for small and medium-sized communities. So when we got the product started, we recognized right away that the needs of like a Vancouver or a Toronto, for example, can be very, very different from a much more rural deployment. And we found that we felt that we could really differentiate a lot more and address their specific needs a lot more for those small to medium-sized communities. The other reason we did that is simply because there's more of them, and it is also a shorter sales cycle, and there's significantly less competition that are out there, which helps across the board. We also try to, we mentioned the high retention factor. That's because we drive general community engagement as well. So about 80% of our communities use the service for day-to-day communication. So whether that's, hey, here's a reminder, tax day is tomorrow, or here's a local event that's going on, or we're shutting off water to your block, what have you. That regular usage pattern tends to create a greater dependency on the service and familiarity with the client base. And that drives up much higher retention values than other offerings. And finally, support is a key differentiator. So we made the decision when we launched the product, we are proceeding with a single tier support scheme. The idea here is this is an emergency notification service fundamentally. And, if you're in the middle of a fire, the last thing you want somebody on the far end of the phone saying is, hey, we can't support you in this manner because you didn't buy the gold package. That's not what we do. It's not what we're about on that factor. So we give everybody the same level of support. It's 24/7, 365. If the fire chief has to evacuate the emergency operations center because the fire is encroaching, he picks up the phone, he calls us, and he basically can dictate to our support engineers exactly what they want to say, and we can send out the alerts on their behalf. That happened this weekend with some of the flooding and stuff that was going on in Texas. So while we weren't at the epicenter of the event, we had clients that were 30 or 40 kilometers away. Their communication staff and their emergency staff were all out in the field assisting with search and rescue efforts. And, we got the call that said, hey, can you step up and assist in some of the communications efforts to our local communities here? So it's that kind of a relationship. And once you've gone through these things with folks, they're much more reluctant to leave you down the road. A little bit about financial trends. So the graph or the image on the top left is a graph of our sales by product. And you can see in the orange line, that is our legacy product. You can see it's, kind of dropping down slightly year over year, kind of that 8 to 10% range. And the gray line that's moving upwards to the right is our Voyant Alert and these are sales numbers, not revenue numbers, as it moves forward. So basically, we close a sale. It is a prepaid subscription, happens every year, and then we amortize that across the year on a monthly basis. Below that, we see two lines as well. So the orange one is our cost of goods. You'll notice that that's kind of flat, and we'll go into that momentarily here. And then the gray line is basically our OpEx trends. And kind of in 2023, kind of May, June timeframe, we had released a major release of our product. And at that point, we wanted to pivot the company more towards profitability at that point. And so we did do a corporate restructuring. And we let go a few people, we cut costs, and you can see that reflected in that trend line there. The two kind of combine and they result in the graph on the right, which is basically our net operating income. And so you can see we kind of moved into the profitable realm last year, and we're kind of continuing in that vein as we go along. Now, the thing of note and that often gets overlooked here that's quite interesting is that we are coming up to another inflection point on our net operating income. And it's driven actually by that very boring orange line on the bottom left chart, the cost of goods that looks like it's running flat. And what's of interest about that is so this is the cost it costs us to send out these alerts. And so this might be the charge that say TELUS or Bell Canada appoints to us for sending out a text message. Or it might be the carrying costs that Amazon charges us for our cloud server infrastructure. And we've done a good job keeping that very consistent. What's going on behind the scenes, consistent with the increased sales, is that while the COGS has stayed flat, our system and load has increased 340% over that same period of time. So we've gone from a load of, say, 2.5 million alerts per year in December to about 8.8 as of March of 2025, and it continues to grow. We're probably closer to 9 or 10 now million alerts a year in terms of the current run rate that we're at. And so, by keeping that flat and having that sales trend continue upwards, that's going to keep fueling the net operating income. Where the inflection point comes is with our next upcoming release here, and we've made this public previously in our MD&A and whatnot. And that is our focus is on reducing our cost of goods. And in our upcoming release, we should be able to reduce our cost to transmit an alert here by about a factor of 2. So taking it from, say, 5 cents per alert down to about 2.5 cents. And we believe that's that will drive the inflection that will kind of fuel the next year or so of operation in terms of operating income. These combine for annual recurring revenue trends. So our ARR here. So you can see basically the blue line is the legacy product and slow decline. And the orange line is the growing element for the Voyant Alert product. So what's next? So in the short term, we mentioned we do have a positive cash flow. We are going to be continuing to apply that cash flow to the balance sheet liabilities. So if you're familiar with us and some of our financial postings, as of Q1, we kind of had about 800,000 on the books in AP and accrued liabilities. We're looking to reduce that to about 300,000 by year end 2025. The other thing that we're doing is reducing COGS. So that's an incredibly important thing for us. This is what allows us to scale and create these inflection points. So specifically these notification transmission costs. And there's more things we can do there. But the idea is we want to drive that gross margin on Voyant Alert from kind of the today number of 70% to something north of 80, closing on 85% if we can. Second thing we want to do is really work on expanding our addressable market, primarily in the enterprise space. So we're talking about integrations with HR systems, Active Directory, LDAP, that sort of thing, which is what the larger enterprises tend to need. Longer term, we're going to continue to focus on that organic growth. The referral model is working well for us. We have different kinds of campaigns that we have going on to help stimulate that. And hopefully we will see if the numbers pan out. Voyant Alert kind of topping in at another $300,000-400,000 a year from now at an 80% gross margin. So continuing to be profitable and cash flow positive there. We do look for strategic resellers, and we have been in conversations with some. As many of you will appreciate, sometimes resellers work out and sometimes they don't, but it doesn't mean that we don't keep trying. And then opportunistically, any opportunities for any tuck-ins. So, we look at them. We haven't done any yet, but we're always looking to see if there's something out there that works. The advantage of this is that it doesn't require any more dollars on our part or services that we have to apply. So we're pretty happy with the company. I think the early fire seasons that we're seeing and everything else is just kind of reaffirming the need for these kinds of communications products as we go along. So I'd like to stop there, and I guess and that's kind of it for me. And just thank you all for your time.
Perfect. Brian, thank you so much. Reminder, those that are listening, if you've got a question you'd like me to ask Brian, please use the chat function. We'll ask the question. You covered a lot of my questions here, Brian, but one that I wanted to ask was around the sales cycle. How long does it typically take you to close on a potential client?
If they're coming in from a referral point of view, we're talking somewhere on the order of 8 weeks in general. If they're coming in, if it's a cold call where we've kind of outreached and they're not familiar, that can take anywhere from 6 months, to larger, which is why we're doing everything we can to kind of stimulate that referral model and that shorter sales cycle. It lowers all of our cost of acquisition, to be honest.
Yeah, of course. Maybe talk a little bit about competition. You're not the only company out there with this type of product. Certainly, you mentioned the difference between the large communities and the small communities. What does competition look like on the small community side?
It typically is the conventional kind of mass email stuff that's out there. Some of the larger players had gotten footholds in the smaller communities, but they were larger U.S. entities for the most part. And Canadian privacy legislation kind of likes to see everything stored in Canada, personal information and whatnot, and that becomes challenging for some of the larger U.S. entities to comply with some of that. They centralize everything in the U.S. and that, and they're also less adapted, I guess, to smaller communities. A lot of their sales guys are, they're looking after, if they're in the enterprise space, maybe they want to, get in with the Chicago Bulls basketball team or, the city of New York. These can be pretty challenging to kind of shift gears down to the needs of the smaller guys. And, they're less focused, they're less responsive. So in Canada, there are kind of different kind of telematic solutions that are out there, but they tend to be text, email. They certainly don't bring the larger game in, the personalization elements that we do to the table. So.
Gotcha. Now, I mean, you're still a small company. Resources are always tight for companies of your size. I mean, you're cash flowing now, but is there any other resources that you're sort of still struggling to find, whether it's people or other things you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, you always look for good, strong
Hmm.
marketing people,
Hmm.
that sort of thing, people that can bring, those skills to the table. Sometimes you find them and they work, and sometimes they don't. But
Hmm.
it doesn't mean you don't stop.
Hmm.
But we're looking for people that can bring, I guess, out of the box thinking to
Hmm.
the table in some of the stuff. It's very clear that the conventional models are getting dated and old. How many outbound emails can you send that you
Hmm.
reasonably expect a return on?
Hmm.
It doesn't happen. So, there's other outreach models that we want to try to explore.
Hmm.
On the technical side, um, on the enterprise side, there's a lot of integrations that are required, and they can be very challenging as you move into, trying to integrate with custom products and large human resource data sets, that kind of thing. That if you're dealing with a company that's 20 people in size, things are relatively easy. You can do that manually. But if you're dealing with people, a company or an entity that's got 20,000 employees, for example,
Hmm.
you're not going to be doing with that, in that kind of a model.
Hmm. Um, Brian, what keeps you up at night? What's the biggest challenge you face as a company?
Well, there's twofold.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. It's
the
never just
first,
one. Yeah, it's
yeah,
never
yeah,
just
there's
one.
never one. No. So it is, what if it breaks? And this is
Hmm.
something that we all have, everybody in the company looks at. And, that it underscores our testing, it underscores our philosophy about bug fixes, you
Hmm.
know, every, and I'm proud of all of our developers because every one of them are very receptive to, hey, we have an issue, how do we fix it?
Hmm.
Kind of thing. Because, this is not a business where you can afford to fail on
Hmm.
this. A lot of other applications, if you fail, somebody's going to have a bad day. If we fail, somebody's going to have a really, really bad day,
Hmm.
in terms of how it goes out. So, we build in redundancy costs, both in development time and everything else. But, it's the underpinning of everything that we do,
Hmm.
is it's got to be robust. The second thing is that this company and the way we choose to sell it, um, we don't have direct control over our own brand in a lot of cases,
Hmm.
right? So it goes out to the market as Voyant Alert. People download the app, they see the app. But remember, the content and the timing of the messages are all filled in and done by the local municipal people. So we're that tool that people use. But oftentimes, that recipient can conflate the message with, the message deliverer, which is us.
Hmm.
So we've had occasions where, we'll step out of out of Western
Hmm.
Canada here. We've had cases where a rather, arduous mayor had lost a dog at 11 o'clock and decided that it was appropriate to use the system to put out a vacuum, a critical alert and wake everybody up to look for this little terrier. Um, these are kinds of, this is an extreme example, but it's,
Yeah.
when they make mistakes, we get the support calls. Most recently here in BC, we had an earthquake that went off,
Hmm.
and there were challenges with the alerting system that went out through the province and the federal system, in terms of ubiquitous delivery, I guess I'll put it.
Hmm.
But we had a huge number of support clients that phoned in and said, "Hey, so and so got the message, and so
Hmm.
didn't get the message." And it's like, well, we weren't involved with that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, brand ownership can be a bit of a challenge.
Hmm. Um, and like if you were to look forward, I mean, you've got enough to handle right now, but looking forward, what other areas or what other initiatives are you guys working towards?
I believe there's opportunity in the lone worker stuff
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
terms of what we're seeing, both in enterprise and in the municipal sectors. I think we can bring some interesting value and perspective to that. And then there's other more niche ones, everything from kind of licensing. How do I get a fire permit? That sort of stuff. And I'm not suggesting that we have to build all of those ourselves.
Hmm.
Maybe this is an area where we partner or we look into on occasion, that sort of thing. So I
Hmm.
think I think those kinds of elements
Mhm.
are real opportunities for us to upsell into the communities.
Mhm. So one of the questions that came in is around how consumers actually sign up for the alert. Maybe walk us through, a community takes on your product. What kind of
Yeah.
happens from the consumer side?
So if it's kind of from scratch,
Mhm.
and we'll kind of go with it from that approach, we develop as part of the package a bunch of marketing material that is kind of co-branded
Mhm.
for the client. So for the the village, if you will, or the town.
Mhm.
And then they kind of do a big launch press activities. It's up on their website. And the collateral is kind of it's broad, right? We have newspaper stuff, we have publication stuff. We've wrapped buses, because they want a big sign to wrap a bus and signage and
Mhm.
so we work with the client depending on their size to have a general awareness campaign and then a launch. People get directed then to either the mobile app or to a
Mhm.
login page on the web where they can register for email or SMS or voice calls or with the app. And what they do is they basically give us a location.
Mhm.
It can be something as refined as a full address or just a town, right? Maybe it's just
Mhm.
a city of Maple Ridge. And then what we'll do is we will place what we call a location pin at an appropriate location. So if you want to know everything exactly about what's going on about your home, the
Mhm.
more precise, the more accurate the information is that you're going to get. So we place these location pins inside of the account, and then we detect to see whether or not it is serviced by any of our clients. So, and who the nearest client might be, and we provide that guidance. We have your contact information. We do not require name information
Mhm.
at all, so it can be as anonymous as you want. If you're nervous about um, putting in your address, you can put in the address two or three houses down, or just give the
Mhm.
postal code. It can be as accurate or as flexible as you want. On the mobile app, we do not do location tracking. We do have a facility to do location tracking for um, critical events. So if you wanted to be notified and you're on the road of a like a wildfire breaking out
Mhm.
and it's not impacting your home, but you're in the car.
Mhm.
So we do that, but it does require the user's direct consent. You have to manually go in and set, location
Mhm.
tracking permissions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So um, everything is maintained in an encrypted format on
Mhm.
servers that reside here in Canada. All the data stays in Canada, or in
Mhm.
the case of our US clients in the US.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, Brian, Matt asked a question. He says, how long does it take to recognize revenue on your income statement? In other words, when can we expect deferred revenue to be recognized on the income statement?
So we do it from the subscription period start. So if let's say, Matt, let's say you took out a subscription and you gave us an August 14th. Let's say you paid $12,000 and you gave us an art for 1 year subscription, and the start date on the subscription was August 14th. So on August in our income statement, we would reflect $1,000 a month for August all the way through to the following July. So it's basically the subscription amount divided by the period of time on a monthly basis. And we do it that way. And our flip point is the 15th. So anything later than the 15th in the month, we push to the next. Anything before that, we keep in month.
Mhm. I mean, so is it typical that you get paid up front for a year contract? Is that the way it works, or do you have contracts that where they typically or literally pay monthly?
No, it's all a year in
Yeah,
advance that,
yeah.
that we pay. We have some clients that we pay on we include a usage fee on.
Oh,
You
right.
know,
Mhm.
so how many, maybe it's 6 cents per alert or something like that, right? And in those cases, we will basically reconcile with them every six
Mhm.
months in arrears.
Mhm. Gotcha. Another question's come in asking, as far as like the number of communities you expect to sign on over the course of the next year or so. Give us, I mean, hard to tell exactly, but can you give us a sense of any kind of visibility you have in that pipeline of potential new business?
Sure. It ranges, and we asked
Mhm.
earlier about how long does it take,
Mhm.
and so provincial government kind of prospects and deals,
Mhm.
at a ministerial level, they can take upwards of a year,
Mhm.
to kind of roll in. They're certainly, they go out to RFP, they're much longer. From a conventional municipality perspective, we're looking at about 60 communities a year that are
Mhm.
coming on board. So, a little more than one a week in general as they roll out. The summer months are quieter, and that's simply
Mhm.
because the key decision makers are often out in the field fighting fires
Mhm.
in some cases. So,
Mhm.
you'll see it a little quieter here July and August, and then it'll pick up in September, October, and then certainly into the next quarter,
Mhm.
and it kind of picks up that way.
Mhm. And how many communities can you onboard in a given time? Is there a bottleneck in that process?
Generally not. I mean,
Mhm.
well, I'm sure there is. We haven't run into it yet. We've
Mhm.
we've we've been successful in onboarding, 7 or 8 communities a week.
Mhm.
It the challenge that we have is in training. So the mechanics of setting them up on the system and getting the accounts up and running is very low in terms of the cost it takes and the timing. But it's coordinating, getting them in, getting them trained, getting them to understand the system and
Mhm.
working through it that way. Because some of these, a lot of times they have their own internal processes that they want to follow at a client level, and they kind of have to work through that and make some
Mhm.
decisions about, you know, how do they want the alerts to look? Like, what are the rules for the alert?
Mhm.
Not everybody is going to get a critical alert if a
Mhm.
fire is 30 kilometers away, but do we want to let people know?
Mhm.
That kind of thing.
Right. Um, Brian, as investors and we're watching this business, what do you think is the most important things to focus on, either metrics or potential catalysts that might give us better insight into the progress of the business?
Sure. So, I wish I could tell you otherwise. I don't really see like that huge inflection point yet
Hmm.
that you want to see in a SaaS company.
Hmm.
But we're seeing very solid, very steady growth. And, I'll take that whenever I can. The metrics that I would watch, certainly that annual recurring revenue and making sure that's growing, that's fueling the bottom line. The other one is the stickiness factor. So what is our retention? We're sitting at
Hmm.
north of 96%. If that were to start to fall, I would start to ask, why?
Hmm.
And then the last one I think that's important, at least from my perspective, is that cost of goods and that gross margin line.
Hmm.
So that's what's going to be driving the cash flow of the business engine as we go forward. That's what's going to be freeing up the cash that will allow us to invest in other marketing initiatives and fuel other growth down the road.
Hmm. By my math, when I saw the presentation, I think in total in Canada and US, there's about 23,000 sort of addressable communities that would fit into your category. How many do you have so far? What was the number you gave?
We have about 800 communities that
Okay.
we have coverage for now. You know, I want to make sure that people don't
Yeah.
misinterpret that. So these are communities that are sending out alerts. It doesn't necessarily mean 800 clients because some of these communities band together and
Okay.
three or
Yeah.
four of them might come in and take out a larger subscription. We might do something like the regional district of Okanagan Similkameen
Hmm.
or Thompson Nicola Regional District, kind of around Kamloops,
Hmm.
which will then break out into 12 or 14 other communities underneath that.
Hmm.
So, um, we have about 800 towns that we're
Hmm.
getting paid for, not necessarily 800 contracts.
I understand. Understand. But still, my point I was going to try to make is that there is still early stages in terms of
Oh yeah.
penetration into this market. There's still a lot of room for growth.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, listen, that sort of wraps up all my questions. We always like to leave you an opportunity to sort of, give a key message or key takeaway. Brian, what would you say is the most important thing that everybody walks away with today?
I think everybody needs it, right? Right. We're seeing that more and more.
Mhm.
And I wish it were otherwise, but I think the trends that we're all realizing and seeing every year, that fire season is starting sooner.
Mhm.
And as good as those federal systems are, and they're excellent, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I think they do a great job of getting that alert out. The mechanics of it is such that they have to be somewhat agnostic, right?
Mhm.
They're generic in nature. You know, somebody in Ottawa sending out an alert from BC isn't going to tell you that, the evacuation center for your fire is at the Trail Memorial Arena, and this is how you get
Mhm.
to it. So, there's value in the context that we provide, and that context is really critical during these seminal events that people
Mhm.
go through.
Mhm.
So
Fantastic. Well, this has been great, Brian. I appreciate it. We've been speaking with CEO Brian McKinney, CEO of ICEsoft Technologies. Symbol is ISFT on the CSE. Brian, appreciate the time you spent with us today and look forward to catching up the next time.
thanks again so much, everybody. Bye bye.
You got it. Bye for now.